Episode 6 of the podcast is up and live. It's the Juicebox Junkies, Marty Coleman, Brian Dunleavy, Matt Conkle, Cristian Espinosa. Fellas, how's it going today?
Good.
Going.
Yeah.
Is
No
anybody
baseball yet, but it's going as good as you get otherwise.
I was going to say, has anybody else spent the night crying or consoling a 15-year-old? Like, he came home yesterday from school, which is about the time that Manfred put his face on TV, and not happy. I'm questioning my father's skills because there's a few choice words from a 15-year-old that wasn't expecting. But I guess that's a good place to start. The lockout. Cristian, you wrote about the lockout today for Climbing Taos Hill, where we all write, and we'd appreciate whoever listens to this to go check it out. But you wrote about the lockout today and some of the reactions. So why don't you start us off with your thoughts?
Yeah, so obviously the big news is that there was a deadline that kind of implemented by the ownership group and Manfred to come up with a deal. It was yesterday, March 1st, Tuesday at around 5 p.m. Eastern time. And I think the MLB submitted what they called their quote final and best offer at around 3:30. And then I think after taking a look at this, the players union decided, they weren't going to be able to make that deadline happen. And so Mr. Manfred, in all of his infinite wisdom, has decided to cancel the first two series of the season, which is, I think, 6 games or so, which for the Astros, that's the 2 opening series there in Houston at Minute Maid against the Phillies and the New York Yankees. So we're already slated to miss some games, unfortunately. The league and the players are still large chasm separating them on 3 big issues: the competitive balance tax, league's minimum salaries, and then the size of arbitration player or pre-arbitration player bonus pool. So really the players are looking to kind of protect the young players and sort of some of the guys who aren't at the upper echelons of the pay scale and some and try to get to negotiate some protection with service time manipulation and things like that. And the owners obviously just want more money. So and they don't want to give it up. And so I think we're still at a standstill as of what I heard last, is there was nothing scheduled for them to even meet. The owners have been kind of trying to do their best to manipulate the story, I think, in the media a little bit. The night before the deadline, the league was very optimistic that there was a path to a deal, and all of a sudden their tune changed the next day. The players union issued a communication, their statement on Twitter that says we were nowhere close, no matter at any point. So there seems to be some already, some finger pointing and stuff like that as well. But yeah, I as far as thoughts go, I mean, I don't really know, what's going to take who's going to break first. The owners are willing to miss a few games, but I don't think they're willing to miss a ton of games. And obviously players want to get paid. This canceling games already creates another set of issues that needs to be negotiated as well. That what are we going to do about salaries for this season? Because now we've canceled 6 games. Do we prorate it? Manfred said, well, we're canceling games and games aren't played, players aren't being paid. So there's already a hard line stance there. I don't know. It took the owners 43 days to issue its first proposal. I think we're at 91 days since the lockout, or somewhere right around there. So I think we better be prepared for another set of games being canceled as well. So,
well, here's the thing. You brought it up that this sets up the cancellation of games brings up a whole new set of problems. So what are the Astros going to do now? Are they going to have 75 home games and 81 road games? Are they, is a road series now going to become a home series to make it 78 to 78? And that all assumes the 156 games. What if they miss more than that? It just brings up all kinds of additional problems that, like, they didn't have enough problems already, right? And I also saw that some of the players were, as you said, they weren't even close. They were saying, "Wait a second," and Manfred didn't even answer the question. One of the questions was about why did nothing happen, and all of a sudden, the last 2 days have been busy, 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 and he just hemmed and hawed around it, and basically said that's what happens in negotiations. It didn't have to, though, right? It didn't have to. The owners have lost the war of words and the battle of social media, in my estimation. I still don't think they're 100% at fault, but they're probably like 98 in my mind right now, right? When you see what they're doing and how they're approaching this, it's like they don't even want to play. I sound like my son now, who believes the owners don't want to play.
That's the thing is, like, if you speak specifically to the Astros, the union rep is Lance McCullers Jr., and he got on Twitter a little fiery, and I think he's already deleted his account. I think the quote was something like, "They walked out on us in Dallas. They locked out the players. Took them 6 weeks to get a proposal together. Takes weeks at a time to respond to proposals." I think his sentiment was that the league and the league and the owners don't really care about the fans or the baseball or the game. I'm just making implying that they care about money. And he said it's exhausting. And so he had some other choice words too, but that's generally, and I think he's since deleted his account or deactivated or whatever. But yeah, clearly the players are pretty frustrated too.
Yeah, he was getting some pushback from some fans yesterday, so maybe that's why his account ended up being deleted. Matt Kunkel, your observations and thoughts on the lockout as we are going to miss baseball.
I mean, we kind of called this a couple episodes ago. We thought we were going to miss some time. I mean, I think we were trying to be pessimistic with a glass of whiskey in our hands. It turns out we were right. Just hearing what's going on, I side mostly with the players. I think most people do. I think what they're pushing for is protecting the younger players and the players that aren't on the high end of the pay scale. And I like what they're doing to try to incentivize winning. Stuff with the draft, service time, minimum salary. But we saw the chasm a month and a half ago, and this really hasn't gotten any closer. So I think we're going to miss more. I guess I'll take a hot take side, and I'll just jump on the owner's side just briefly. Over the weekend, someone posted a picture of a 10K showing a ball club's revenues and saying, "Hey, they make money all the time. Why are they not conceding some help for the players?" And my thing is, first of all, that was intentionally misleading. Although I do respect the guy that posted it, that was intentionally misleading, and I think everyone on Twitter was feeling it too. But if you look at, I take a step. I just looked at the Forbes franchise valuation list, top 50 in the world, and if you look at it, there's 27 NFL teams, there's 11 NBA teams, and there's 6 MLB teams. And they look at the valuation, net operating income of the whole deal. They got guys that are great at that. There's only 6 MLB teams, and it's your usual suspects: Dodgers, Yankees, Cubs, Red Sox. And then I said, hey, I'm gonna look at what I can on the NBA side, and I pulled this out, and I felt like sharing this today. I was looking at the net incomes of some of these NBA franchises that are high in valuation for last year. The LA Lakers with LeBron James, $60 million last year. Not a whole lot, right? The Milwaukee Bucks, they won the championship. Their operating income last year, $9 million. The Phoenix Suns, they made the finals, $11 million. The Memphis Grizzlies, they have a future MVP in Ja Morant, $11 million. So I think what I'm trying to say is I understand. I side with the players, and I want them to concede some more. It doesn't look like they want to play. Looks like they want to sit on their bags of money, but they're not all like that. I think we have to be a little more realistic at where the sport is. We're not as big as the NFL or the NBA. We don't have the TV deal is nice, but it's not what the NBA is getting. We don't have the international appeal of what the NBA is getting, or even the NFL now. So I think us fans are right to be frustrated, but I think we got to have a little more perspective on where our frustrations are, other than just, hey, the owners are sitting on a bag of money and they don't want to give the fans games and the players money. I think it's a little more complicated than that.
Absolutely, it's more complicated than that. And Cristian pointed that out on Twitter a few days ago. Who was it? Was it Passan or Passan that just posted one number and said, here's
the rich.
This proves my point. I'm like, you're trying to prove a point about billion-dollar organizations with one number is completely ridiculous and one-sided. And I'll take a little bit of side on the owners too. The one thing I don't agree with what the players are doing and saying is they're saying, hey, we got screwed on the last two, I think it's two deals. So we're not getting screwed this time. Well, that's not the owner's fault that you got screwed. So you can say that, and you can say, I want $300 million for whatever, and that doesn't mean that's realistic. I'm sorry you got screwed. You signed the deal. I saw your face, Matt Kunkel. Agree or disagree? It's not the owner's fault the players got screwed.
No.
Yeah, okay. Brian, we haven't heard from you yet on this topic. What's your take on the current situation for the lockout?
Well, my hot take is going to be a hybrid. I think of all of it, and so kind of living in the mushy middle. But I think the number one, and we all express this, and especially you, Marty, more than us. I think the number one person hurt by all this are the fans. That's it. There's nobody else that is suffering more than the fans are, because in the end, there's going to be a deal. The owners are going to get their money. The players are going to get their money. And who loses out? The fans. We lose out on games, on seasons, perhaps. We were just talking about, before we got on here, about Verlander. This might be his last season as an Astro. Well, we're missing out on some Verlander starts and some Verlander time, as a fan base. So I think that's the number one thing. And the other thing I really don't get is why, and I do agree with the players on this side, why it takes so long for the owners to get back to them. That doesn't make any sense. It seems like they're in the back room with their cigars plotting on how we can make sure that we squeeze every penny out of it. And then on the flip side, it seems like the players, they obviously they want more money. That's the number one issue. They all want more money. But it seems like if they really, both sides were genuine and they were focused on getting the deal done and hitting each topic and coming to an agreement, they would have come to an agreement. At least it looked like they were pretty close. I just saw the number. It seemed like the league minimum they were pretty close on. I mean, they went from $675 up to $700,000 a year, and the players were saying $725 as the league minimum, and going up $20K a year, and with the owners going up $10K a year. At least that's some movement. So I'll bring a little ray of hope that there was one category that they were closer on, and they got close to a deal. But for me, I would have said, let's sit down, let's come to an agreement on this one thing, push that away so we can focus on the other ones. Let's negotiate that whole league minimum. I mean, everybody in this podcast and whatnot, none of us are sitting anywhere near $700K a year, and that's for the worst player in the league gets $700K a year. So I mean, you think about it that way. Yeah, it's going to look bad if the players can't agree to $700K as the league minimum, and going up $10,000 a year. The players look bad on that spot. I totally agree. The owners went up on that, so the owners, to their defense, that should have been agreed upon. That should have been finalized. There should have been some progress. It should have been said, we got one thing done. Now we have all these other categories we still have to iron out, but we got one thing out of the way, so we're one step closer. That absolutely. And Manfred should have been front and center with that and saying, "Hey, we're close on this. Let's get it done."
Yeah, it's almost like it's an all or nothing deal, right? We have to agree on everything, or we're not going to agree on anything, which is kind of crazy when things are so complicated to expect everything to be done in a day. I almost got the feeling that the owners yesterday that they didn't want a deal. There were players on social media today or yesterday saying they changed it on us, right? They made us think they were telling everybody they were close. Then they come back and say, we changed our stance when we didn't change anything. They changed the verbiage in the contract on that last when they gave their last offer. They changed stuff. They expected the players to accept it, and that's not the way to negotiate either. So I don't know. I guess we could beat this to death, and I think we're going to have a little while to talk about this. So let's move on and actually talk about some players and some baseball. Today's minor leaguer we're going to talk about is Korey Lee. Brian, you've done some research and on Korey Lee, and let's hear your take on Korey Lee. Hopefully, the future of the Astros catching position.
Yeah, I think the future looks bright for him. He is an outstanding and quick rising prospect in the Astros system. He has, he's only been, for the Astros, he just got the number one prospect for the Astros. Let's say that, but he was voted this year by Baseball America as number 70 for preseason rankings for prospects. So number 70 in the MLB, and I think that is definitely partially biased too, because that also is based on his position at the catcher position. They're always going to rank the big home run hitters and the big time pitchers ahead of catchers, and that's just because of stats and that sort of thing. So with that said, coming out in 2019, first round selection, and he looks like he's got all the parts. In 2021, he went all the way up the whole ladder from A+ to AAA by the end of the season, and put together a solid season. He's not going to be the top hitting catcher in the league, but we don't need that. And I'm actually working on a piece right now for Climb Style Hill, trying to see about the future and should Korey Lee be on the Astros roster this whole season, as opposed to just doing some work in the minor leagues and getting ready again. And my argument is pretty simple. If you look at Machete's season, his average, his production, he's a fantastic pitch caller. The pitchers like him, and he has a great defensive skill set. Offensively, he adds absolutely nothing. Zero. I mean, he's below the Mendoza line. I mean, he is there. It's just not good, for him. So if you get any production out of him, so last season, just going through Korey Lee's stats real quick, the three teams combined, 11 home runs, 45 RBIs, 277 average, 438 slugging percentage, 778 OPS. That's going to at least get you some production where he's not going to be the anchor at the bottom of the lineup like Maldonado has been, and it was it's a compromise. You sacrifice offense for the great pitch calling and the camaraderie with the pitchers and the defense that he brings, but you obviously lose out once it gets to his name in the lineup. And even I was rooting for him because Maldonado would even surprise in the playoffs and hit some home run, some clutch home run in the 7th inning where you need it, and it's like they're in the bottom of the lineup and a pitcher just grooves him one and he cranks it, and that never materialized this postseason either. And I'm just like, man, I think Maldonado. I think he's towards the end of his career. I think it'd be a great thing if Korey Lee. And again, this is what I wrote about the first time when I wrote about him as one of our prospects. he is the number one guy hurt by no spring training because if he had a fantastic spring training, he would be on the roster guaranteed. There wouldn't be a question. We wouldn't have to debate it. He'd be the guy. He'd be there. You're not going to have Max Stassi or Jason Castro there. You're going to have Korey Lee there. That's not even a question. And Korey Lee will platoon with Maldonado. I would guess that the top two pitchers might have Maldonado, but the bottom three, they could prefer Korey Lee because they're going to be with him longer, and it could be an easy split that way. But we'll see the way it goes and how it goes. I think he's at least good for Maldonado's off days to be the backup catcher to play 40 games, or who knows how many games we're going to play, but on a regular season, 40 games in the major leagues, and maybe getting some more time in September, when Maldonado needs to rest more because he's got the older knees and, everything like that. So I think that would be the best place for him. I understand keeping him down to get time and get innings and that sort of thing. But I think if he could have a season catching Verlander, even if it's just bullpens, I think that will do a lot more for his career than hanging out in AAA.
It's always a trade-off, like you said, giving up the defense for the offense. And I don't think the Astros needed to last year, but Carlos Correa was in that lineup. So if you take out the big bat of Correa, you may need a little more from the bottom of the lineup. Cristian, if I remember correctly, you were a catcher back in the day. Do you have any thoughts on Korey Lee?
Yeah, I think the defense, I don't think he's making strides. And so there's the video from last October of him throwing somebody out there in AAA. He's made some changes. I think Astros coaches have asked him to use the one knee catching to help quicken some of the release on his throws. It sounds like they've shortened up his arm stroke, so he's going, cocking back, holding the ball behind his ear and just firing in all one nice clean motion. And so he's already has a pretty strong arm, what I would call a plus arm. And so, I think he threw out 43% of his base runners in 2021, and that's pretty solid for him. And, obviously he's going to learn, the pitchers and things over time and just how to manage a game generally. And that comes with game experience. I think I could see a spot for him in Houston, on the roster, but I also could see where, just having a full time in AAA to go through game situations, work with coaches. Korey Lee moved to Houston this winter with him, I believe his girlfriend and him moved here. And he said this is the first time that he's been able to be in one location, train. This is where his home team is. He's been on traveling clubs and everything since probably junior high. And so, so I think he's finally starting to lay some roots down and get settled. And I think that's, you could see some of that in his ability to improve defensively, which is, hard to make leaps and bounds at this level, if in that regard. So,
well, maybe the answer is kind of a hybrid of the two, right? He spends time in the minors, and if someone gets hurt or goes on the almost said disabled list, the injured list for 7 days or whatever, that Korey Lee can come up and spend a week here, 15 days there in the big leagues and get some experience and get some rest on those young knees, which we want to stay young as long as possible at the catching position. Matt Kunkel, it appears that you kicked Cristian off so you could talk about Korey Lee.
I had enough of him. Get off, man.
Go ahead. Your take on Korey Lee.
Well, hey, anytime you have a catcher who projects to be a plus bat, you get excited. I looked at some of his stats and I've watched some of his videos. He seems to be a guy that hits between 250 and 300 at all his stops in the minors, makes really good contact, and he doesn't have amazing power, but he seems like he'll have enough power to be successful in the majors. I guess, I'll just kind of reiterate some of the things that we were talking about. For the catcher position, with maybe the exception of some high offense catchers like JT Realmuto or Will Smith. For me personally, I value more on not what they can offer on the bat, but what they offer behind the plate, and anything they have with their bat is gravy. We're talking about how much we like Machete. I guess the flip side of that would be the Yankees got a guy, Gary Sanchez, who has incredible power. And I think he's a great bat, but he's been pretty subpar defensively.
Absolutely.
It doesn't seem to call pitches to the liking of at least Garrett Cole and some other pitchers on his staff. So I mean, to me, like that his production at the plate doesn't outweigh what he does as the catcher. And I think the Yankees realize that. And that's why they've been plugging him into the DH more. And then like an example like Machete, like I'm fine with him hitting around the Mendoza line with like 11 or 12 homers and just kind of being, a surprise power guy once in a while, as long as he's just that stalwart defensive guy that calls good pitches and throws guys out. So with Korey Lee this year, it's tough because if the Astros are competing, it's against it's counterintuitive to say let's put in a guy in his first year and try to plug him in as much as you can when you're trying to win. But heck, if he's playing on Machete's off days and he can get opportunities to pinch hit on occasion because it seems like he's got a pretty solid bat and he can learn catching from McCullers and Verlander or Presley, I think that'll do only but help his career, and he seems to be the future. He seems to be progressing. I expect him to probably be our opening day starter next year or the year after. Who knows? But it's a little tricky when you're competing. When's the appropriate time to integrate a new young prospect like this?
Yeah, that's why I suggested that maybe they work him in slowly and see if he can handle the rigors. Because really, you don't know if he's going to hit any better, major league pitching any better than Maldonado's hitting major league pitching, right? Who the heck knows? Is he going to be a 250 hitter or a 150 hitter? Hard to tell until he has an opportunity, but I think it's worth a shot. We're going to talk about Cristian Javier, but Cristian Espinoza, internet went out like mine did last week or 2 weeks ago or whenever it was. So let's get a little bit in about Cristian Javier here. I wrote about him some today. I've got an article on Clementines Hill coming up in the next day or so whenever it gets posted about 4 trades the Astros should not make whenever the lockout ends. One of those I put on there was Cristian Javier. Now, Brian and I talked about how everyone says the Astros starting rotation is full and solid and there's nothing to worry about. We got too many pitchers. Maybe we need to trade Cristian Javier for someone in the bullpen. We also earlier talked about how Justin Verlander may not be back next year. Lance McCullers is injured this year. We don't know what's going to come out of Lance McCullers at the end of this year. So I am of the mind, and I think Brian agrees with me here, that the rotation may look a lot different next week, as we talked about on the previous podcast, next year, as we talked about on the previous podcast. But we don't even know about this year. Starting pitchers are not cheap, and they're not easy to develop. Yet the Astros have one on their staff. It's documented. Javier's a better in the starting role than a relieving role. The Astros have this guy there. Okay, let's say everybody's healthy. Verlander, McCullers, everything's fine. Somebody's going to get injured, right? It's not a matter of if pitchers are going to get injured. It's a matter of when and how long they're going to be out. I would be against trading Cristian Javier. I think he needs to be a starter. I don't know what that means. Do you trade somebody else? Do you have him sit out and start as needed this year? But it seems like a big waste to me. I'm of the opinion Cristian Javier should be a starter with the Houston Astros. How that all comes to be and who gets booted, I don't know, but I don't think they should trade him. That's not necessarily the conversation here. My point is I believe he's a starter and should be a starter, and to have him in the bullpen is a huge waste, and to trade him would be a waste too. Matt Kunkel, your take.
Well, I mean, if he's a starter, this year, who gets bumped out to the bullpen? Is it Urquidy? Is it Luis Garcia? It seems like there's a logjam of guys that project to be pretty good, end of the rotation starting pitchers, or could be really good long relievers. I mean, that's a good problem for the Astros to have. I personally think Javier has the highest trade value of those other two players that I just mentioned. I think he's got more stuff. I mean, personally, yeah. I mean, I don't want the Astros to trade any of those three. I think all those three are great, but if I had to get rid of one, it wouldn't be Javier. I like that he's shown that he's a good starter, and he's got great velocity, and I feel like he raises his level of play against the better competition. I absolutely wouldn't want to move him, but it's tricky what the Astros are going to be going through this year, because they're going to have JV's back. We don't know about McCullers. I anticipate a bounce back season from Jake Odorizzi. Everyone, please don't hold your breath on that. But I anticipate some sort of bounce back from a terrible season. And then we got our young guys, Framber, Cristian, Javier, Urquidy, and Luis Garcia. I mean, it's a good problem for the Astros to have. I'm interested to see what Dusty's take is on how to deploy these guys when they're all healthy, or if they're ever all healthy. But I think if of those three that I mentioned, long term, I would grasp more tightly with Cristian Javier than I would with Urquidy or Luis Garcia, for sure. Okay,
here's my semi-hot take. Maybe I should grab the wrong one there. My semi-hot take, and I already forgot it. It was related to. You think Jake Odorizzi is going to have a comeback year. I think Luis Garcia is going to regress to the mean. How about that? I think he can't continue to pitch 5 1/3 innings. He's killing the bullpen. He pitched in some good luck last year. I think he's going to fall back a little bit. I'm sorry, we're here to talk about Cristian Javier, but I thought about that when you mentioned his name. I'm like, oh yeah, I got this other take. Oh, Brian Dunleavy, now you on Cristian Javier. What's your take?
Well, I'm going to first start off with not Cristian Javier because as Matt had mentioned, depending on when the season starts, I think that's the other question that remains up in the air. But, we have JV back as number one. And then McCullers hopefully back when the season starts at number 2, but that's a question mark. So if he's not back, I think you have the opportunity for Javier to be a starter. I think that's his only good shot, is if somebody's injured, and if McCullers, especially if it's not back, that's his chance to be a starter. But the other problem that you have then is you're paying Odorizzi all this money, and I don't think he makes the rotation. But then you pay him the money, you want him to be in the rotation at the same time, right? So to Matt's point, I think the number one trade bait is Odorizzi right now. I think if they had a solid offer once they are back into the swing of things and everything's opened up, I think if they got a solid offer from him, even if it's a handful of prospects, considering our farm system was horribly ranked, I'd say take it, jump on that bandwagon. But for Javier, I agree, Marty. We talked a little bit about this before, looking at his stats, in his relief appearances. I just went through all of his relief appearances towards the end of last season, and I just, cataloged them all. And basically every other relief appearance, he gave up more than 1 run and couldn't last, maybe an inning, maybe a little bit longer. But, his ERA was in the 9s for every other relief appearance. And you can't do that. And then I looked and I broke it down by team, and every team that he gave up runs to were all the competing teams that we're going to face in the playoffs. So I think he has zero value as a relief pitcher. You like to have him as a long reliever for the playoffs, or to have, maybe a long reliever if a guy just totally burns out in the second inning. But I don't think he is built for that. I think, there are certain players and pitchers are especially a funny bunch. There's certain players that you throw them into a situation in the middle of the game and they're great and they have no problem with that. I don't think Javier is that guy. I think he needs the getting amped up before the game, pre-game prep, get on the mound, to start off the game. I think he needs that kind of preparation mentally to be able to prepare to perform his best. And he has good stuff, like Matt said. He has good stuff. I think he has the potential of the ones that we listed. If we had to rank potential in order, which is a strange ranking because none of them have pitched really a full, slate of back-to-back seasons like we talked about last week, Marty. Yep. I think you're going to see some sophomore slumping with some of them. And you said Luis Garcia. I think that's probably the best bet. But the question mark is out for all of them for their second real season in a row. If we get enough games, if it's not another half season like we had before, will Urquidy be able to perform for a whole season? Will Garcia be able to perform for a whole season? And sophomore slump is real, so I think he's regressing. And then Valdez, the same question remains. I think Javier's your in that order of things. I'd go Framber, Valdez, and then I'd go Javier, and then Garcia and Urquidy have to prove it. Who's in front of who for this season? And I honestly think based on innings and postseason innings, I personally like Urquidy better than I like Garcia. I think Garcia had his moments, but I think Urquidy is the more consistent, the more everyday starter than Garcia is. He can prove me wrong. That's fine. And Urquidy can prove me wrong the other just as much too, that he's not the guy, but based on the evidence that I've seen, I'd rather have Cristian Javier in there with the potential to be great over those two guys.
Yeah, I think we all kind of agree and are saying the same thing. It's really weird because you're talking about the sophomore slumps and the potential for those. And then there's the two injured guys, right? JV and McCullers. And so on the surface, it looks like the rotation is just full, but there's a lot of question marks there for me, right? If JV was 32 years old, there wouldn't be so many question marks, right? But can McCullers stay healthy for an entire year after he comes back from this injury? Can JV come back at 39 years old? After hasn't pitched in like a year and a half. It was July 24th of 2020 since he last pitched in the major league game. And he's not a spring chicken anymore, at least baseball-wise. But all good questions. And sorry Cristian Espinosa didn't get to chime in, but his internet went down like mine did. But we're going to call it a show. We're going to call it a show there, fellas. I appreciate it again. And good topics, good conversation. I need to think of a new title for this show because I already used All We Need Now is Baseball, but that's really what we need to keep the conversation going and have things to talk about every Wednesday afternoon or evening, depending on where you are in the world. But Brian Dunleavy, Matt Kunkel, thanks again, and we'll see you next week, hopefully.
Sounds good. Thanks, Marty.
Later.